If you think latest is always the greatest, let me humbly remind you that popular opinion is often influenced by marketing hype. Having tested all three bikes back to back, I'll show you the true all-rounder for your specific riding needs isn't always the one getting all the media attention. Having owned three Hondas in the past 2 decades, I was expecting a smooth engine and a slick transmission, and the NX500 did not disappoint. The light pull clutch was my favorite thing when I was stuck in traffic. It's the smoothest in mid-revs with a zen-like vibe that lets you enjoy the scenery at cruising speeds. But at this point, a little voice in my head went, "It's a lot more fun to ride a slow bike fast than a fast bike slow." So I gave it a bit of a twist of the wrist, if you know what I mean. For all the talk about the revised ECU and updated fueling, I'd like to report that it does not like going anywhere close to the red line, so I respectfully pulled back and rode it back into the town. But even in low revs, the fueling isn't exactly as smooth as I was expecting. But surprisingly, when I switched to the Scrambler, which is called SCL500 in the US and CL500 everywhere else, a low revs lug-along character was noticeable without any compromise in the mid-range. The peak power is claimed to be slightly lower than the NX, but honestly, I couldn't say if it was remarkably deficient. However, it did lack a top end, and the roughness up top was similar to the NX. And then I borrowed Doc's DeLorean to travel back in time and ride the 2023 CB500X. I wanted to see how unsophisticated it was compared to the shiny new toys I just rode in 2025. Except for feeling slightly sluggish, the engine character and performance did not feel significantly different. And I know that might sound contradictory, but I'll tell you why those two things can coexist. But before I dive into how that impacts their around town, touring, and off-roading capability, let me summarize the engine tuning comparison in 3 short and sweet lines. 1. All three love the mid-revs and hate the top end. The CL500 lugs along much better in low revs, and the NX feels marginally more refined than the CB, but only if you rode them in quick succession. But this is where it gets interesting. If you think the subtle changes don't significantly differentiate the 3 bikes, I got news for you. It's precisely how the subtle differences compound that makes each bike excel at 3 very different things. Take braking for instance. The CB and NX both have 296mm twin discs, while the Scrambler gets a 310mm single disc. So at highway speeds, the Scrambler brakes aren't as strong. Not worryingly bad, but just not as quick to stop. Around town though, the difference disappears. But before you say, "Dude, I could have figured that out from the spec sheet," well, here's why reading the spec sheet is never enough. Even though the CB and NX have identical braking specs, the NX braking feels noticeably stronger. Why, you may ask? Well, that's because stiff front suspensions often improve braking bite and feel. Something I learned when I upgraded my ZX6R race bike suspension, and the front brake performance and feedback magically improved to a level I had never experienced before.
Hey, have you even introduced yourself yet?
My bad. My name is Faraz. 2 decades of long-distance touring and track exposure has given me the real-world experience to thoroughly review and compare bikes to help you with your due diligence. Happy? Okay, let's get back to suspension comparison. As much as I appreciate sporty suspensions, sometimes you fix one thing and mess up the other. Ask me how I know. Even though the CB and NX have Showa's separate function big piston forks, Honda stiffened up the NX's front suspension but left the rear seemingly unchanged. I feel like they were going for sportier handling while keeping the CB500X comfort, but it ended up being a confused compromise. The front is too stiff, so you feel every bump, but it does tip into corners quicker. Problem is, once you're leaned over, the soft rear gives you no feedback whatsoever about rear tire grip. The CB, on the other hand, has properly matched front and rear suspension with one clear goal: comfort. Both the CB and the CL gave me clear, predictable behavior right from the start. And yes, the right side up forks and twin rear shocks on the CL are just fine for the intended purpose. Even when I tried cornering shenanigans, nothing felt unexpected or unnatural on either. The similarity in the 3 suspensions is the lack of adjustability, but weirdly enough, the Scrambler has more rear suspension travel than the Adventure variant. What? Why? Yeah, that's how I reacted the first time I read that, because that would make you expect greater off-road capability until you realize that the ground clearance is lower by a full inch. I'll come back to that spaghetti of suspension configurations in a minute, but let me try and focus on the positives first. The first positive is that because this video is going to save you from getting swayed by the marketing hype, this is a perfect opportunity for you to hit the subscribe button. But when it comes to the bikes, not only is the CL500 seat height 1.6 inches lower than the other two, it's also the lightest of the bunch. No wonder it was my favorite for bombing around town. But the scrambler seat that looks really cool isn't comfortable enough for anything more than 60 to 90 minutes. The CB and NX seats are definitely better. Their adjustable windshields could be counted as an advantage over the scrambler, but only because it doesn't have one. If you're never gonna go over 65 miles an hour or carry a set of Allen wrenches in your pocket all the time, you'll be fine. But just like all the stock windshields I've ever tested, they don't work over 65 to 70 miles an hour. If you're taller than 6 foot, you would most likely be cramped in that saddle, as our friend Mr. Zach Korsh pointed out. I'm a foot and a half shorter than Shaquille O'Neal, but taller than Kevin Hart, so I was able to fit pretty okay on all three bikes. But remember I said the NX500 feels quicker even though the engine tuning doesn't feel different. Well, that's because the combination of a stiff front suspension, lighter wheels, and about 7 pounds of weight saving that come together to make it feel a little sportier. But on those lighter wheels, they've still chosen to stick with Dunlop Trail Max tires that are known to prioritize longevity over performance. To that I'd say no thank you. A set of Michelins is the first thing I'd get if I ever bought any of these bikes. But on the topic of standard equipment, unfortunately there isn't a very long list. No rear rack, no center stand or bash plate, or even ADV foot pegs on adventure touring bikes as per Honda website. Oh wait, they did reserve the ADV foot pegs with rubber inserts for the scrambler. But even the brand new NX500, just like the other two, does not get USB charging port in 2025. However, here's a secret. Did you know that they do have the wiring for it that travels from the harness to the handlebar? So you can purchase an optional 12-volt charging port and hook it up to the wire on the handlebar, or pay somebody to do it. But you're not done yet. Now you need a 12-volt to USB adapter. Plug that in so you can finally charge your phone. Come on, Honda, I'm from India and even I'm not that cheap. At this point, I couldn't dare to ask about silly frills like handguards or adjustable clutch levers, which every other manufacturer on the planet is offering already. Okay, let me calm down. When it comes to electronic rider aids, the NX500 has switchable traction control, so you could go off-road and have some fun, right? Wrong. Because the ABS is still undefeatable. No sliding, no shenanigans. And before I start looking like this meme, let me go to the things that I do like. The new 5-inch TFT on the NX is nice and bright. You get Bluetooth connectivity with media, phone, and navigation. I know people complain about the CL500 LCD being hard to read. I did too, but I also bothered to read the owner's manual and find out that you can actually increase the LCD brightness. Maybe you should try that. Thankfully, all lights are LED, but owners report that the headlights aren't bright enough when it's really dark out there. But if you exclude night riding from your adventures, you don't need to worry about weak headlights, right? But the upside of a short list of standard accessories is that now you have a whole list of things to buy well before you can think of wasting money on silly things like aftermarket exhaust upgrades. Although if you're switching the megaphone looking muffler on the scrambler, I totally get it. In fact, I'll link a reasonably priced Vance Hines slip-on exhaust I found during my research. You're welcome. As tradition dictates, here's the exhaust notes comparison. Okay, I'm done bashing them for everything they don't give you. Let's now focus on how to fix those issues. Here's a list of all the things that would make great upgrades depending on which problems you want to solve first. I've linked as many of them in the description as possible. By the way, on all three bikes, the engine is a stress member of that chassis. So an engine guard and bash plate would be important upgrades. I would also get mud flaps to protect those exposed exhaust headers. But you have to budget for all of that on top of the price of the bike, and obviously the NX500 being the latest is the most expensive, especially when you compare it with bikes from other manufacturers. I made that comparison video as well, and I will link it at the end. But within these two, if you're not swayed by the TFT dash and 3 kilos or 7-pound weight drop, the CB500X looks like a pretty good deal to me, especially because now you can find one in the used market. And being a Honda, unless someone has completely neglected maintenance, you could find some really good deals. If you want to save your friends from falling for the hype or give them some upgrade ideas, share this video with them and be their hero. But remember to also remind them to look for known issues with that platform, like water pumps and rear wheel bearings going bad. The paint on the engine also tends to chip off or blister over time. The headers tend to lose their sheen if you don't protect and clean them. By the way, not a reliability issue, but the CL500 ignition key switch is on the side. It does look cool, but if you're really going to take it scrambling, don't drop it on that side unless you carry the spare keys. There isn't going to be a huge difference in fuel efficiency, but the CL500 has a smaller tank and therefore a shorter range. But overall, the NX500 has a peppy sports touring bike vibe to it. It's okay around town, just not as easy to ride in low revs as the CL500. Now, being a small channel, I don't get access to test ride them off-road, but based on reviews by people I trust and respect, both the NX and CB are reasonably capable within the constraints of the limited suspension travel and ground clearance. The noticeable update is the 5-inch TFT with navigation, which a lot of us would appreciate. CL500 is my personal favorite among the three, but I would use it for around town riding and easy off-road shenanigans over the weekend. It isn't quite cut out for touring, but if you really love it and are motivated enough, you can throw in some dollars and make it or any other bike touring worthy. I've ridden 1,000 miles in a day on a CBR650F for crying out loud. But if adventure touring is the main purpose, the CB500X continues to be the best option among these three. I would highly recommend folks at Ride Ventures who regularly take the CB on wild adventure trips. Since it's been discontinued, one could actually negotiate the price in the used market and ride it till the wheels fall off. You can watch this video to compare more ADVs or this one for scramblers, but now you know the best bike isn't always the newest. It's the one that does everything you need with the least amount of money thrown at it. And that wisdom is what separates the veterans from the marketing victims. This is Faraz dropping truth bombs one video at a time.